time for the Daly Planet podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest, undertaking an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and directors and film festivals and this really long list of stuff that I know nothing about, but they gave it to me and they really wanted me to read through it. And that's all I can really say about it, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daly Planet podcast, your weekly show for all things movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. My name is Scott Daly and I'm your host, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and interdimensional fear monster, Michael Grubb. Michael, how is it going?
Oh, hey there. Yeah, what a stupid concept for a movie.
Oh my God.
What are we going to talk about today, Scott?
We're here to discuss the newest Stephen King adaptation of his most beloved novel, It, directed by Andy Muschietti, who only directed one other film before this, Mama, which was a kind of a rocky horror film. There's parts of it I really liked, and there's parts of it I didn't. As usual, this will be a spoiler-free discussion at first, and then we'll move into the spoilers later into the conversation. So if you haven't seen it yet, there is still something you can listen to here. We will clearly denote those spoilers. And after that, we're going to wrap this whole thing up with our usual recommendation segment, What We've Been Watching. But first, Michael, how about we talk about some news?
Cool. What's been going on in the world this week?
Well, nothing much. There's just Star Wars Episode 9 losing its director.
Oh, wait. Who was directing it?
Colin Trevorrow, who directed the kind of popular indie movie Safety Not Guaranteed, which after directing one low-budget indie film, they gave him Jurassic World. And of course, that movie made over $1.5 billion. So
that movie made bank. So who's directing it now?
They have not announced that yet. It's kind of chaos. There's a lot of different things that people are saying. I think the most popular rumor is that Rian Johnson, who directed Episode 8, is going to come back and do Episode 9 because he is on the record saying that he loved the experience of directing Star Wars and he would do another one. But this is really interesting because Colin Trevorrow had a movie that came out this year called Book of Henry, which was panned by critics. I never saw it because it looked awful, but it did not do well. It was panned, so a lot of people were saying he needs to not be on this movie anymore. And I guess Disney agreed with him because he's gone.
Wow. Well, they're fickle.
Yeah, of course, this is the third film since Star Wars has been part of Disney that has seen director changes and director problems. Right. Rogue One, of course, brought a new director in at the end. The Harrison Ford spinoff fired their directors near the very end of production, and now we have this. So it's interesting, and there's a lot of speculation about what's going on at Disney with this, why this keeps happening, but we don't really know.
Seems like maybe Disney's trying to keep too much control over the films and it's pissing the directors off, or
vice versa. The directors are trying to assert their own form of control and craft the film around their certain style when what Disney wants is a corporately produced film that appeals widely to everyone and has no unique style to it.
Yeah, I'd like to see some new things come into the Star Wars world. I'm tired of the movies. I mean, both recent movies, Rogue One and Episode 7, have had so many like throwbacks to original things to just like stuff nostalgia down your throat.
Yeah.
I just want to see something new.
Yeah, I like Rian Johnson, the director of Episode 8, a lot. I liked his movie Looper a lot. I think he has a very unique style, and I'm hoping that'll come through in this movie, but we'll see. But yeah, I was not excited for Episode 9 because I did not like Jurassic World at all. I thought that was a terrible nostalgia trip movie, which maybe that's why they hired him for this one.
Exactly.
But he's gone now, so they're probably going to announce that. The rumors I read is that this was information that was known for a very long time, and they were just putting off announcing it. So they might already have a director lined up. They just haven't announced that yet either. We'll see.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see who they get.
Yeah, there's been all kinds of crazy rumors. I think it would be fun to get a female director to direct a Star Wars movie, and Patty Jenkins, coming off of her huge success of Wonder Woman, would be a thing that I think would satisfy Disney's want for someone with experience that also attracts crowds, and would give someone else an opportunity to direct the movie. So I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but that would be interesting.
Yeah, that might be kind of cool. I was pretty lukewarm on Wonder Woman, but it wasn't because of the director. It was more because of the script, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'd be interesting.
All right, so that's all. As soon as we find out what's going on with with that movie, we'll probably talk about it again. But until now, we have no idea. So on to the next piece of news. Jordan Peele and Spike Lee are teaming up to make a movie called Black Klansman, which is a KKK crime thriller with Blumhouse Productions, the small horror production company. Jordan Peele, of course, who saw amazing success this past year with Get Out. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
I didn't know, but I heard a lot of good things.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good. And Spike Lee is pretty well known in his ability to really dive into race relations and tell interesting stories. So I think the two of them together could make a very interesting movie.
It's an interesting combination.
Yeah, it is.
Spike Lee's being pretty serious.
Yes.
Director, whereas Jordan Peele is obviously known for his comedy.
Yeah.
So that could have a unique tone to it.
But the thing about Get Out was, as much as it was a horror film, it was definitely a horror comedy movie. So while it was creepy and unnerving, there was some comedic beats to it, like the movie we're talking about today.
Yeah. Were there?
Huh?
Were there comedic beats? I guess there were comedic beats.
Oh my God, The movie's hilarious. Are you kidding me?
About it.
Okay, so let's move on. Our last piece of news is just a box office update because the movie we are talking about today, It, made $117.2 million at the box office this weekend. That's an estimate, of course, because we're recording this on a Sunday afternoon and we're not really sure. Some people are estimating it could go higher than that. Some outlets are saying up to 125. Regardless, this is the third biggest opening of the year. It has beat out Spider-Man Homecoming, which is kind of huge for a rated R horror film. To give you some perspective on how huge that is for a rated R horror film, the one that it just beat, the old record holder for highest opening weekend for rated R horror, was at $52.5 million. So this more than doubled that. That's huge.
I was kind of surprised at this movie's popularity. I mean, even before I saw it, just because, it's like a scary. Like I don't remember anyone having a lot of nostalgia for the movie It. Why did everyone want to see this? And when I went, there must have been like a third like small children in the audience, and this isn't really a small children movie.
No, it is not. Well, people love the book. The book is, besides The Shining, possibly King's most well-known book. It's one of my favorite of his books. And the previous movie was a made-for-TV, miniseries 2-night event thing that was about 3 hours in total and was really bad. It was really bad. People remember Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise as being memorable, and it is, and I think he did a good job. But the film as a whole was awful. And so this was an opportunity to get a real version of this on screen, and they did it.
I guess that's a good way of looking at it. I was kind of disheartened when you said how well it was doing, because I kind of see it as a remake, and I want them to stop doing remakes. I want people to stop seeing remakes just because they're familiar with the source material.
So
this was kind of the first real It movie.
I really think it is, because it is like Stephen King's a very dark storyteller. This is a very dark story. There's a lot of blood. There's a lot of crazy ass shit that happens in that book. Some of which they smartly removed from even this version of the movie because it is really fucked up. Stephen King's a little weird, but the made for TV movie like completely removed all that stuff. Like there's still an uneasiness and a creepiness to it, but this was the 90s on television, so there was not a lot they could get away with.
Right.
So this was probably and as a person who's read the book, we're gonna get into this movie and talk about it in detail. But as a person who's read this book, this is probably the best Stephen King adaptation. And I don't mean like the best movie that's been created by a Stephen King book, but like The Shining is like notorious for that it used the setting and the idea, but basically did whatever it wants, so much so that Stephen King hates that movie because it's completely different from what his book was. But this is probably the most accurate, most true to what Stephen King was trying to do adaptation that I've ever seen. And I think it works very well. I really, really enjoyed this movie. So with that note, I guess let's jump into the movie itself.
I saw something.
A clown. Yeah, I saw him too. Float too.
What happens when another Georgie goes missing?
Float too.
Or one of us?
Float too.
Are you just gonna pretend it isn't happening like everyone else in this town?
Float too.
If we stick together, we'll win.
For those of you that don't know, it is the story of a group of children that they call themselves the Losers Club. In the original book, they were kids from 1955. In this, they've aged it up to 1980 something. Basically, the book was written in the 80s, so they just took present day and then moved back 27 years. And these kids are haunted by a clown called Pennywise, the dancing clown, who kind of like shows up to the town of Derry every 27 years and steals people and kills children. And the instigating event of this is that our main character, Bill's little brother, Georgie, is taken by the clown and goes missing. In the books, they find his body. In this, they do not. There's never a body found, which kind of changes Bill's motivation a little bit in the movie. But so they basically team together to try to defeat this clown. In the book, they cut back and forth between an adult version of them and a kid's version of them, but that was removed for this. This is just the kid's tale. The part 2 of this movie will cover everyone as an adult. So that's it. Michael, what did you think of it?
Well, like I texted you when I left the movie about 30 minutes ago, I was bored.
Okay, why?
Why? I think it's because I thought about this a lot during the movie, and I don't watch a lot of horror movies, so this is kind of me trying to grasp at what the sort of things to appreciate about the genre are. And I think one big problem that kind of made me not really scared, it seemed like the movie was really, really trying to scare me, like all of the time, but not in really obvious ways. Like there were no rules to Pennywise. It seemed like he could kind of be anywhere and just kind of do anything, like just for the point of being creepy. And like he could have just murdered any of those children any time, but he didn't. So I kind of, my mind subconscious intuited that they all had plot armor and like none of them were going to die. So it was hard for me to like grasp the consequences because I didn't understand the rules of Pennywise. Because he killed Georgie right away. Everyone else he just kind of messed with and never killed.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Without getting into spoilers just yet, I have you haven't spoiled anything. I don't like there's going to be a sequel. This is a 30-year-old book. There's not too many spoilers we can do in here, but we will get into it in a bit. I get that. I understand that.
Yeah. So maybe you could shortly explain to me, because you do like horror movies. What is it you most appreciate about them and you think is the best part of the horror movie experience?
I think it's very fun to be scared. Generally, I like being scared. I like that feeling of unease you get while watching a movie, where you get so uncomfortable that even for a second you leave the fact that you're watching a movie and you are legitimately like afraid. Like and this movie is not the scariest film I've ever seen. That is definitely true. But there were definitely moments where, especially as someone who's read the book and knows the scenes are coming, where I really wanted to look away from the screen. I really was having trouble looking, knowing something was about to happen. But on top of that, I think horror is a great method of exploring themes, just like sci-fi, just like a bunch of other genre films. That horror is a window into the exploration of a specific theme. In this, it's specifically childhood trauma. It's fear and how that rules you. and how you can get over that and conquer that. And it uses the monster of It and these children to discuss that theme. And the thing that I think this story did lose by cutting out the adult part of that is kind of the cyclical nature of trauma, and how trauma that affects you as a kid carries over into your adult life. They're going to get there in the second movie, but we have to see that in a much delayed fashion. But yeah, that's why I like these kind of genre films.
Yeah, I can get that, and I guess that movie failed on this front for me. But one thing I will say is I liked the characters. The best parts of the movie to me were the parts like where Pennywise wasn't in it, or was manifested in a way that it seemed like it could just be like the children's kind of subconscious fears, and not just this explicit like weird creature who's messing with them for a reason that I never understood.
Yeah. And I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna, finish the thought on a lot of horror movies. I don't think spend as much time with the characters. They're just like, oh, we just need to like make them somewhat relatable so you can kind of be jump scared when they're in a cabin or something.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Absolutely.
Characters were well fleshed out here, and they had their own things going on, and that was my favorite part.
And I think really when you get down to Stephen King and why people like Stephen King so much, that is the reason. And that's why I think this movie is such a successful adaptation, because it recognizes that the fundamental core of this movie and that book is the Losers Club, these characters and how these characters relate to each other and how they come together kind of from the fringes of society to form this team that is capable of fighting back against this great evil thing that's a stand-in for all their personal traumas.
I wish they had kind of introduced the personal traumas earlier, because really extremely early in the movie, like all of the children encounter the clown, and it seems really random. Like one of my complaints was going to be at that point that there was no meaning behind any of the scary scenes. And later you find out it like has to do with all of their kind of worst fears. But I feel when those first scenes happen, you don't know that. And it was just like, well, why is there this weird, like melty faced woman now? They're just like trying really hard to think up scary things and then just like throwing them in the middle of a random scene.
I will agree with you that the problem I think this movie did have is that especially at the beginning of the film, there are a lot of very disconnected scenes where they are just, here's this character scene, and then that scene ends and it doesn't carry over to the next scene. We just move to another little thing and then have that character scary scene. And yeah, I agree with you that is a problem with the film. And it almost takes too long for our group of characters to get together. And the result in that is some of the characters lose a little bit of their impact. They don't really have a lot to do. Mike Hanlon, the black kid in the group, is a victim of that, and he is very, very sparsely characterized. You don't get to see a lot. You don't get to do a lot with him, which is a shame, because in the book, Mike Hanlon is the historian. The stuff that they gave to Ben is Mike in the book, and he is the one that's obsessed with the history of Derry and all that stuff. So they kind of just took his thing away from him and gave it to another character and left him basically with nothing. And
yes, Stanley as well, I felt was pretty undercharacterized.
Right. And I think Stanley, in my opinion, in the book is the least characterized in the book. So it kind of makes sense that that's brought over into the film a little bit. But yeah, I think those two characters really got the short shrift here. But the upside of that is characters like Beverly, who I thought Sophia Lillis did just an amazing job with this character. I liked her so much, and she's exactly how I imagined from the book. But I thought she got more time, and I thought that was very beneficial to her as a character, and the character of Ben as well. Bill, I like. It's funny because Bill's like the leader of the group, the main character. I think the movie almost seems to recognize that he's not as interesting as like Beverly or Ben. So while he's the leader, like it wasn't interested in really shining the spotlight on him very often.
I quite liked him in the movie. I thought
I did too.
He was pretty. They focused on him quite a bit. I mean, all the kid actors did a good job. Which
is another thing I think that is remarkable about this movie is that you know it lives or dies by these kids, and they pulled it off. These were great actors they found. The movie did not cost very much. They got no-name kid actors, with the exception of the kid Eddie, who played the guy from Stranger Things. And
wait, which one was?
Eddie was the one with or wait, is that Richie? I can't keep that.
He's the one with the glasses.
Yeah, Richie was Finn Wolfhard. Yeah, Richie was the one that was from in Stranger Things. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I thought he looked kind of familiar.
Yeah. He's the only one that I had really seen before, and he was great too. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about is I thought this movie was really funny, and I guess you didn't agree, but I was very surprised at how funny the movie was. I think Richie as the comedic relief character was very humorous, and I laughed a lot throughout this movie.
I wouldn't call it funny. I mean, I certainly never laughed. I don't remember anyone in the audience really laughing, but it was a light tone. It was kind of, some of it had kind of a fun, good-hearted tone to it that was reminiscent of 80s movies.
Yeah, and I think part of, what I've seen written online about this a little bit that I don't know if I fully agree with, but kind of, is that this would be like a great introductory horror film for people that are not too familiar with the genre, because it is only kind of scary and it does have those lighthearted moments, and I don't know if I fully agree with that, but I think they have a certain point to them.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this was kind of my introductory horror movie, I suppose.
Yeah. I was very interested to see. I really didn't know what your response to this movie was going to be, because I know you hadn't seen horror films before. I know you weren't really familiar with the story at all, and I was very interested to see what your take on it was. So I'm not surprised that it wasn't your favorite thing, but I did think in the back of my mind it was like the one thing that he is definitely going to like is the characters.
Yeah, I always appreciate that in movies, and there were things to like about this movie. A lot of the kind of even like creepy scenes with the clown and like balloons and stuff looked really cool.
Yeah.
I just didn't find them effective. It wasn't, what like you said, it wasn't, the scenes weren't really tied together enough. They kind of like they kind of showed you too much too soon and kind of blew the mystery away. And it kind of like is showing the alien and aliens, kind of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I agree with that, though, because I think the idea here is that Pennywise, is pervasive, that it has infected this town and it is everywhere, and there is really no safe harbor. And so hiding it seems unnecessary to me.
Yeah, I was just kept looking for some kind of parable, like... So another scary movie I've seen, which I think we've talked about on the podcast before, is Silent Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about Silent Hill that kind of brought things together is that the creepiness kind of emerged from the kind of darkness of the people of the town, and everything was kind of a twist on that. Whereas Pennywise was just like a creepy clown alien who came to this city for no reason. And they go into like the history, and he shows up every 27 years for some reason. And the origin of it was not explained, except that it's been happening for a long time. So it seemed a bit pointless, and they made a big deal of the fear thing, and like it can't hurt you if you're not afraid of it. But I didn't really buy that, because it just, bit Georgie's arm off. At a moment where Georgie was kind of starting to trust it. Like it kind of tricked Georgie into like being its prey, which was a very different feel from like trying to scare everyone else before it killed them. If it was going to kill them.
I think Georgie was terrified as he reached for the boat. I think it held that beat for a very long time as he like...
Certainly not more terrified than like Beverly with all the blood shooting out and being like strangled by hair, Like I didn't see where the line was. Like I was never afraid that any of these people were going to be killed after like their first scene, where I was like, they just kind of ended.
I don't know if I mean, there are some tropes to horror films that your characters tend to escape from inescapable situations where others don't, but I never felt like it's hard to talk about this without talking about spoilers. So maybe we should just move into spoilers. Yeah. So let's just do that. For those that haven't seen it yet, if you like scary movies, if you've read this book, I really think you'll like it. Go see the movie and then come back and listen to this part, because starting right now, we're talking spoilers. All right. So there's a few things I wanted to say in response to your thing, which is that I think the town of Derry, which is, it feels trite to say that like the town is like another character, because that's what everyone says. But in the case of Derry, I think it really is true that this town is rotten from the core, and it's partially because Pennywise has always been there since the beginning, and there is like people look the other way. People are constantly creepy. Like I think of the pharmacist that like creepily, like you think he's a nice guy at first, and then it's very obvious that he like has some creepy thing with Bev that is just so unsettling and uncomfortable, that kind of thing infests the town. Like there's the group of people that drive by while Ben is getting bullied, and they just kind of look at him and then keep going. There's the woman who sees Georgie playing by the grate at the beginning and does nothing. Like there's this like ignoring it and inaction that has infested this town that is allowing this thing to go on, and everyone's looking the other way. No one's taking it seriously. No one's doing anything about anything. And that is sinister and evil.
They kind of hint at that. I feel like maybe you're getting a lot of that from the book, because they didn't have a lot of non-children characters interacting in the movie. I mean, there was Beverly's dad, who was obviously a bad person. The pharmacist was creepy. I mean, I didn't get any
Eddie's
sense.
mother.
Yeah, Eddie's mother.
Bill's father.
Yeah, well, sort of. I mean, he just is like seems upset that he was reminded of his son at the beginning.
It's not just even upset. It's that he's gone. Move on. We have to move on now. He's gone. We can't.
Yeah, I mean, that seems kind of like a realistic response from someone that doesn't, necessarily mean that Bill's being abused.
But I think when you extrapolate that, well, I don't think Bill's being abused. I just think there is an indifference and a creepiness at the heart of this town that is allowing this stuff to operate in a way that it is. Pennywise is able to succeed in this town, is able to do this in this town because no one seems to be willing to do anything about it. Except for these kids. They're the only ones. I mean, even Bev says that near the end. If we don't stop this thing, no one else is, because no one is going to do anything. Everyone is capable of doing something, and they all turn the other way.
But they also don't know that it's happening.
I mean,
they show you that like adults can't see any of this stuff happening.
Yeah, but I think that's a metaphor for them that they don't want to see. I mean, they say that Derry has 6 times the murder rate, and that's just the adults. The kids are even worse. Like, it doesn't take a lot to say that there's something rotten going on in this town, and no one's doing anything. Like, that's the whole point when they put the new missing kid poster over the old one, is that they're just like they're in this cycle where they're just, a kid goes missing, we don't find him, then another kid goes missing, and we just move on. We just paste over the last one, forget they were even there, and just move on.
Yeah, I can see that. So maybe one of the themes of the movie is like just like standing up to evil. Yeah,
facing your fears, working through your trauma. And it's a shame, because I understand why they cut this movie into 2. I really do, because this is a 1,100 page book. It's huge. Like, one thing Stephen King loves to do is write. So distilling everything down to a movie was impossible. And the decision to cut it into 2 movies makes sense structurally, because in the book, they cut back and forth between the adult and kid story. Like, it's not like the first half is the kid story and the second half is the adult story. They're happening simultaneously. Like, chapter by chapter, we cut back and forth between them. And I understand why they decided not to do that, but I do think it loses a little bit of something. And then, maybe in 5 years, we can watch this as one big movie and everything works in a better way.
I can see how that would have brought things around a little bit more, just to kind of explain like why the adults in this town like got the way they were because of this cyclic. And there's explanations towards the origin of Pennywise, the origin of it. They exist in the story. They're in the book,
But I think because they knew that this was going to be a 2-part thing, they did not include those in this first book. So your complaint about how you really didn't understand what this thing was, what it was doing here, why it was here, that exists. But I think they decided in the first movie, we're just going to tell the story of focus on the kid versus clown part, where it's just a representation of fears, and then we'll go into the crazy, I can't even explain how crazy metaphysical stuff that happens with this and what it all ends up being. But I guess they're just saving that for the second story.
That's too bad. That seems like the kind of thing that needs to be there to provide a little bit more meaning to what's going on, at least hint at it a little more.
Yeah, I mean, I think the story still works standalone. Like, if this had tanked, I think the movie still would have worked a little bit. There are parts that I know, like, if you had never read the book, I don't know, I think some of this still would have connected as just, there's an evil monster, and we are kids that have experienced trauma, and we come together and form a team and defeat this thing, and then become closer together at the end. Like that beautiful scene where they do the blood oath, which is like lifted straight out of the book. It's exactly how I imagined it. It's perfect. But I think it would have worked on its own as its own movie. But I'm happy we are getting to see the conclusion of the story.
Yeah, I'm pretty indifferent about it.
All right.
But maybe I'll see the second half when it.
So one thing we didn't talk about was Pennywise. We didn't talk about him in the non-spoiler section. I wish we did, because I want to know what you thought of Bill Skarsgård's interpretation of this character. I guess you don't know the base of it, but how was his performance? Did you like it? Did you like what he was doing?
It was fine. I mean, I never. A lot of him was CG. When his movements and stuff.
Yeah, there's that's a complaint I do have with the movie, that the movie went back to CG a little too often for my tastes. Like the leper that Eddie meets is completely CG, where I think a person made up to look like a leper would have had more space. They would have been there in that scene, and I think that would have been more effective. But
I'm not a big the kind of acting that impresses me is when you have more of a nuanced character to play. Like, I didn't have anything wrong with Heath Ledger's Joker, but it's just his character is such a cartoon that it's not the same kind of acting. Like the cool part about acting to me is like being as human as possible, whereas both of this character Pennywise and the Joker and so forth are kind of trying to be as inhuman as possible.
I guess I get that. I think the character of Pennywise is really hard to pull off, because on the one hand you have to be this happy clown, but you have to have this, like, even when he's not being creepy as shit, which is not very often, but there has to be this undercurrent of creepy unsettling to it. Like, and I think that the sewer grate scene with Georgie at the beginning of the movie is like one of the most iconic scenes in this book. Like, a lot of people that have read this book and maybe haven't read it in a while, when they think of it, they think of that scene. And he has to be this, like, a certain amount of fun that Georgie would listen to and maybe like come a little bit closer, but also like this underlying like tone of creepiness to him that I think Skarsgård really nailed. I really do. Like the way he's talking about, like, can you smell the circus, Georgie? And like describing what the circus has. Like, it's just very unsettling. And I think those are the scariest moments of the story to me. It's not the jump scares. It's not the thing pops out when you weren't expecting it. It's this this air of creepiness that goes in everything. And I think he really did nail that. That is a much more effective way to be creepy, I think. But really, I can't think of a lot of scenes in this movie that were like that besides the first one. Most of the other scenes I remember from the movie were kind of him jumping out of things and like doors shutting and stuff, and people being trapped and stuff like that. So when he unfolded himself out of the fridge, that creeped me out a lot, just because of the unnatural way he's folded up in the fridge. The scariest scene to me was one that I love that the movie didn't even draw attention to, and you might have missed it. When Ben is sitting in the library reading, and that librarian hands him the History of Derry book, there's a scene where it's cutting back between an insert shot of the book and then a medium of him reading the book. And behind him, the librarian is just like almost a little bit out of focus, like leering at him. And every time it cuts back, she moves a little closer and she's a little bit crouched as if she's like ready to jump at him. And like the movie never calls attention to it. It just moves on from that scene. And it was like the creepiest moment to me. It was so scary. Like I was uncomfortable. And she has this like out of focus look on her face that you can barely see that seems like she's like snarling, and creeped me out.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, and I think it wouldn't have worked as well for me if they had called attention to it. Of course, maybe then you would have seen it and then you could have appreciated it, but I wish it had done a little bit more of that, where it's just like there's just weird shit going on in the background that the movie doesn't even call attention to, but you could notice it if you happen to be looking.
Right, and that kind of stuff doesn't kind of like it doesn't reveal too much. It makes you wonder a lot of things, which is scarier than just some explicitly like headless boy chasing you.
Yeah. And it goes into the idea of the town itself being rotten,
right.
A little bit. Like there's conflicting things where that might have been the librarian, or it might have just been Pennywise acting as a librarian. In the book, Pennywise can literally like possess people, and so we see in the movie their bully get possessed, kind of. Which is the very end, is when he kills his father and goes crazy. But in the books, he does that a lot. Like a lot of like King dives into the history of this town a lot in the book. Like we see the events that were just touched on. We see those events in the book. So we see the explosion, the Easter egg hunt explosion at the factory. We see when the one guy murdered a bunch of people at the party. We see all that kind of stuff. And it's like, so you learn more about how Pennywise works and what he does, which
I definitely felt like there's something missing, like with the ironworks explosion and stuff. They kind of mentioned that a few times, and it seemed like that was in some way significant, but they just kind of dropped it.
Yeah, well, and that's at the end of the day, you're adapting such a massive work that some of that detail is going to get lost. But I do think they did a good job of capturing the essence of what the story of, which is these 7 or so kids versus this undescribable fear.
There was a lot of time, though, between the setup and the end confrontation that I felt dragged on because I wasn't really feeling a lot of the suspense. That I think they could have edited down and maybe added in a few more moments that tried to make the suspenseful parts more meaningful.
See, I don't know. I understand you felt that way, but I was along for the ride and I was always there. And I think you cut out a lot of that second act and you lose a lot of the characterization of these people and how they interact. The love triangle between Bill and Ben and Beverly. Like there's a lot going on with Eddie and his mother and the stuff going on there. There's a lot with Stanley, who.
But perhaps a better way to do it for the movie would be just to cut out characters like Stanley, and not waste time, giving him scares but not characterizing him, because it's a bit of it kind of dulls both his character, and you could have taken some of that space to concentrate on, some of the other characters, because there were a lot of characters in this movie.
Yeah, and I thought about that. I thought about, would the movie have been served better if we cut Mike or we cut Stanley?
Right.
And without spoiling the second part of the story, I think you would lose something there, because there is stuff that happens to these characters that even the underwritten characters like Stanley in the book, I think important events happen to them that reflect what's going on.
You said they took some of Mike's characteristics from the book and attributed them to Ben instead.
Right, which is why I'm very interested to see what they do, because in the adult version, Mike has stayed at the town. He's the librarian now. So Mike being the historian was very important to the story. So do they just give that to Ben, which kind of ruins who Ben becomes, because Ben becomes someone drastically different in the future too. So if you give that part of Mike to Ben, then it ruins who adult Ben ends up being, and that ruins like a lot of the cyclical nature of trauma stuff you're talking about here. So I don't know. Like maybe that was a way to do it. Maybe cutting down on characters. I think you'd get a lot of obsessive King fans like yelling at you, but if it had served the movie better, maybe it was the right decision. I don't know. I still think the movie worked very well, even with those underwritten characters.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, clearly a lot of people did like this movie, but I wonder if reading the book first adds a lot, because you feel like you kind of already know these characters, and if they're acting a lot like they do in the book, then that you can kind of fill in the rest.
Yeah, I don't know, because the interesting thing about me is it's been so long since I read this book, so I didn't. If you had asked me, like if you had quizzed me before I walked into this movie about the details of what happens in the book, I would not have remembered. But like it's as you're watching the movie, the details come back to you. So it's probably I don't think you're wrong. I think that there was some of this that I enjoyed much more because I loved the book so much, but I was not like guy who had the entire book memorized and was checking off boxes expecting to see certain things. So
right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So will you go see It Chapter 2?
I'm not planning on it. I mean, maybe by the time it comes out, I'll have refreshed my interest in it.
Yeah.
But I like not where I am right now. I think there are things I appreciated about it, like I said, but I don't see where it's going. As far like not having read the book, like you said, it seems like it should be over, and I was kind of annoyed when the chapter 1 thing appeared at the end, because I was like, oh wait, so did they not beat the clown? So if they didn't beat the clown, then was this all kind of pointless? Like I felt like it would have been a good ending if they just overcome their fear, defeated the clown, and then kind of learned something about friendship or whatever.
Yeah, I will say that at least in the book, it is the reason why it is not over is very satisfying, at least in my opinion. So I can understand that sentiment, and I even thought, I was like, does Michael even know? Does he know about the structure of this? When he sees that chapter 1 thing, is he just going to be like,
yeah, I mean, I hate it when they shoehorn those into movies.
Right. So, but this was not like, this is the one time I will say that this was not shoehorned in. This is what the story was, and they just decided that this was always the plan, just because of how the story's structured.
Right. Okay. Well, that gives me some hope for the point of the sequel.
Yeah. That being said, this movie made a shit ton of money, and there's no way this company does not like milk the shit out of it. So we're probably going to get like a Pennywise origin movie or something stupid.
Just finished, for God's sake.
I know. But this, like I said, 117 million opening weekend on a $35 million budget. This movie is going to be massive. So
yeah, it seems like it. And that surprised me, because like I said, I didn't realize that there was this big It following in the world.
People love scary clowns, man. They love it.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, clowns are objectively creepy. Yeah.
So before we wrapped up here, one of the things I wanted to ask you, and maybe you're not the person to ask this, but I was like, part of the reason why I like this movie so much is because I was so happy to leave a Stephen King adaptation that left me satisfied, because Stephen King adaptations, like every book that Stephen King writes, gets made into a movie. And they're usually like universally horrible. So have you seen a Stephen King adaptation that you like?
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty cliche, but Shawshank Redemption was pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, I think, and it is ironic that some of his most successful adaptations are his short stories and not his full-on novels, because those are probably easier to adapt. Green Mile is another one that was one of his novellas that's pretty well-loved.
Yeah, but no, I haven't seen a lot of Stephen King, or if I have, perhaps I didn't realize that they were Stephen King, because like the first time I saw Shawshank Redemption, I didn't know that was Stephen King. And it took me, it was also like, I think after I watched The Shining that I knew that was Stephen King, even though that's pretty famously Stephen King. So
yeah.
But no, I don't know if I'm appreciate his type of horror.
And I understand that. And I think there is, because there is a reason, like I said at the beginning, that these adaptations are usually so bad, is because Stephen King loves to write, and he writes a lot. His books are always very long, and it is very difficult to translate that into a film. Usually what the adaptation does is take the B-movie plot idea from his book and translate that into a film. And that's not really why people like these things. Like it's the characters, it's the setting, it's the stuff that surrounds this B-movie idea. And I think a lot of people miss that. So I was very happy that this film seemed to understand that at its core.
Right. It definitely paid attention to the characters at its forefront, which was very good.
Yeah.
So they do that with The Shining, because I felt everyone in The Shining was pretty undercharacterized, and that's one of the reasons I didn't really like The Shining.
Yeah. Well, that's The Shining is such an interesting thing because it's Kubrick. It's what he does. He was interested in looking at a very different thing than what that book actually was. Like that is it is nothing. It is nothing like the book. It understands the basic setting. You have the Overlook Hotel. You have the family staying there over the winter. The hotel is haunted. You have the father being the alcoholic, the kid having The Shining, and that's basically it. I mean, you have the father going insane over the course of it, but it's like in the book, Jack Nicholson's character is like, he is an alcoholic. He has hit his kid before, but he's also like much less unhinged. Like Nicholson in the movie plays the character as if he's already kind of crazy before he even gets to the hotel, and the hotel just like gives him an excuse to be. That's not really what the book did. So it is a very different take on the source material.
Okay.
Kubrick was not interested in really adapting. He was just interested in taking it and doing what he wanted with it.
A lot of times that's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it can be hard. Just like, I mean, look at The Hobbit, for example.
Oh God. Yeah. I like The Shining a lot. I think I like The Shining better than this movie, but I do admit that this is a much more true adaptation of the source material than The Shining is. So it's choices that you have to make, and Kubrick wanted to tell his story. This adaptation seemed much more interested in trying to capture what people loved about that book. And I think that the response to it has kind of indicated that, at least for the people that love the book, that they have achieved that.
Yeah, it seems so. Yeah, it's definitely had a pretty massive weekend.
Yeah, I can't believe it, to be honest with you. I'm very shocked. Like, I knew it was going to be big. As the reviews kept coming in, I was like, oh, this is going to do very well this weekend. But like more than double the record of biggest opening. I mean, like, to beat Spider-Man, a PG-13 movie about the most popular character in comics, is insane. It's insane.
Yeah, because Spider-Man, I mean, well, all the superhero movies, one of the reasons they're so popular is they appeal to like every demographic, or they get at least part of every demographic. But yeah, there's a large group of people who just won't see horror movies.
Yeah.
So, although apparently children see horror movies now.
I'm very surprised.
There were so many kids there, man. I was like, am I in the theater for that CG movie with the flying thing that I saw?
That's kind of crazy to me. Like, it's very clearly rated R, but I mean, people took their kids to Deadpool and were like upset that when they learned it was rated R. So people don't pay attention. They're just like, oh, the new movie's out. Let's go see it.
But I mean, this is fucking it.
Yeah, I know.
Like Deadpool, you could confuse as being like a lighthearted superhero romp, but like this is like a horror clown movie.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Exactly what this is.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for it. Maybe in 2 years, we'll come back and talk about the second half. I know that they've, even before the numbers came out, they already started moving towards hiring writers for this movie. I think they've done that. They've hired writers. I don't think the director, Muschietti, has said whether he's coming back or not. We'll see. I think if they offer him enough money, I'm sure he'll do it. And because of the popularity of this, they might just be willing to do that. So we'll see. But I think they're aiming for a 2019 release with that. So maybe we'll be back 2 years from now. and talk about it, Chapter 2.
All right. Can't wait.
All right, but before we go for the week, let's talk about what you've been watching. Michael, do you have anything that you have seen that you would recommend or want to talk about?
I haven't been watching anything, but
Or reading or whatever.
I have been replaying a old video game, Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars Knights of the Old
Oh,
Republic.
you love that game. I still have never played it.
I would recommend it. It still holds up. It's a great exercise in storytelling. It was one of the first video games to have such a strong narrative and such an immersive world. And there's a lot of things that would kind of mirror the structure of a more conventional storytelling medium like a novel or a movie, that I think you would appreciate. So, if you have a spare 40 or 50 hours,
Oh, jeez.
I would recommend.
Is it the type of thing where it's too old, like where you have to like do a bunch of stuff to get it working on modern machines, or is it just...
You can get it on Steam for like $3.
Oh, cool.
And it's still, there's like a couple kind of bugs, but because it's like a 17-year-old game.
Yeah.
But it mostly still runs fine.
Awesome. Well, maybe I will check that out when I have spare time, which is never.
It's probably my favorite Star Wars world thing.
Yeah,
So
which is what frustrates me about these modern Star Wars movies so much, is that you have this massive universe with like infinite stories to tell, and we keep circling around the same group of characters and the same stories over and over again, and it's just like I understand they want to make money, but just take a little risk.
And that's the great thing about Knights of the Old Republic, is that it doesn't reference any of the characters in other Star Wars things.
Thank God.
It's clearly in the Star Wars universe. And it's got some of the, kind of Star Wars tropes, like you've got like a Wookiee character and stuff, but it's not Chewbacca. And it gives you, a more kind of varied look at a Star Wars world.
Awesome. Yeah. So the thing I wanted to talk about is BoJack Horseman, because season 4 dropped on Friday, and I am making my way through it. I'm about the 8th episode. I don't know if you've watched the show ever, Michael.
No. I heard about it from various sources from time to time, but I just for some reason have never sat down and tried to watch it. Is it really funny?
Yeah, it is. It's the Netflix original comedy starring Will Arnett as the title character. It's so hard to describe because it's such a different kind of show. Like, it's a 30-minute comedy that is animated comedy that's taking place in Hollywood. The main character of BoJack Horseman is a horse, like a literal horseman, who was in a 90s sitcom that's basically a ripoff of Full House. That's what it's supposed to be. And now is in modern day and is like having a continuous existential crisis. He's an alcoholic. All his friends like either hate him or he's trying to make a comeback. And it's just kind of his continuing misadventures. And the movie,
it sounds so depressing.
it is, and it's very funny. It's very tongue in cheek. It is not afraid to like poke fun at different things or different people. There's a whole subplot of this one dealing with the character of Mr. Peanut Butter, who is a golden retriever man, who is running for governor of California. So it's poking fun at politics a lot and the 2016 election, but it's not doing it in a way that's like obvious and obnoxious. It's finding funny jokes and clever things within that. And it's also very there is moments of real drama. There was an episode last season that was BoJack was underwater in like an underwater city the entire time, and there's no dialogue in the entire show, and it's very sad and dramatic and touching. And the fact that this show can kind of waffle back and forth between those two extremes in a way that feels believable and true to the characters that they've created in a satirical show is kind of amazing to me. And I can't like the writing is just consistently clever. It's just like the jokes, like I don't think it's never like belly laugh type of funny, but it's just like you're just amazed by the cleverness of it.
Right. That's and what you said about it being able to take itself seriously from time to time is a pretty good indicator of a really clever and well done comedy.
Yeah.
Futurama was like that too a little
Right.
bit.
Yeah,
And there's
absolutely.
the dog which is
God.
what is that?
I'm now going to be depressed the rest of the day just for thinking of that episode.
But it was, it was funny, but it grounds itself. That's the important thing with humor. And that's where I think Family Guy and its ilk kind of go off the rails.
I completely agree.
Is like, the first season is pretty funny, but it just never takes itself seriously. So you're not invested in it at all. It's just a bunch of throwaway, amusing situations.
Yeah, it's really the difference between, Golden Age Simpsons and modern Simpsons too, is that Simpsons took itself seriously at times. It had dramatic episodes that really tugged at your heartstrings, and now it's all just caricatures and archetypes, and it changes the characters at will. It'll stretch a character for a joke if it wants to. It's just a mess.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I think that this has captured that feeling for me, and I really do enjoy it. And the thing that it does that so many other Netflix shows fail at is it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's 13 half-hour episodes, so it never feels like it's dragging on. Like most of the Netflix properties, especially the Marvel shows, I think just go on for way too long, and this is not that show. So I really do like it, and I really recommend it.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll definitely check it out. Maybe one of the things that was keeping me away is I was just kind of afraid it was another one of those throwaway Family Guy type.
No, I don't think so at all. Yeah.
So, I'll check it out.
All right. So that's it for us this week. I don't know what we're going to do next week, Michael. The only movie I think coming out is Darren Aronofsky's Mother, which is another horror film. So I'm not going to make you watch 2 horror films in 2 weeks. So we will figure out something else to do.
Sounds good.
But we will be back next week as always. And thanks for watching that movie, Michael. I know you would not have normally done that. Thanks for doing that for me. It was fun to talk about it.
Yeah, no, it was good for me.
It was a learning experience. There you go.
Yeah. Even though with any movie, well, okay, not with every movie I don't like. It had enough good things that it was worth watching, even though ultimately I wouldn't,
Yeah,
enjoy.
And that's really the most I was hoping for from you, is that, like, I never thought you were going to love this movie, but I was just hoping at least you found a nugget of something to grab onto and appreciate in a movie that that isn't really made to appeal to your interests.
Kind of think about horror too, and like what I would do with a horror movie.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll write a horror short story.
Oh man, I would love to read that.
about an election and a hoe.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, because the So-Called Writers podcast that you guys launched last week, that is another podcast right here on the Daly Planet podcasting network. So that comes out, I think we've decided on Thursdays. So there's only been one episode, but there's going to be a new episode next week.
Yep.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I would love to read your scary story. The thing about hearing a story written by you, a horror story written by you, is because you've never really watched a lot of horror movies, you've never really read a lot of horror books, you are kind of unfamiliar with a lot of the tropes. So seeing your interpretation on that stuff would be really interesting, because you don't know all that stereotypical stuff that people fall back into.
I'll definitely give it a shot sometime, but I may need to spend a little bit more than 30 minutes constructing this.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
This horror story carefully, so that I can really understand how it works.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Yeah.
But yeah, that in itself has been an interesting thing to think about. So
yeah. All right. Well, that's it. That's it for us this week. If you want to reach out to us, you can find us on Twitter at Daily Planet Films, or email us at dailyplanetfilms@gmail.com. If you are not subscribed to this podcast, you can do so on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, everywhere where podcasts are. Please do so you make sure you never miss an episode. And you can find everything else we do at dailyplanetfilms.com. Michael, thanks again, and we will see you all next week. The podcast is over. It's done. We hope you all had some fun. Go back to your work or your school. Maybe the gym. Hey, that's cool. Regardless, just go away. But please come back next